Well, in recent months, media credibility has taken some big hits, with problems for Brian Williams at NBC, the debacle over a rape report by Rolling Stone that turned out to be false, and now a new scandal breaking this week involving ABC News anchor George Stephanopoulos. Yesterday, Stephanopoulos acknowledged that he failed to disclose $75,000 in donations to the Clinton Charitable Foundation. Today, he apologized.
Over the last several years, I've made substantial donations to dozens of charities, including the Clinton Global Foundation. Those donations were a matter of public record, but I should have made additional disclosures on air when we covered the foundation. And I now believe that directing personal donations to that foundation was a mistake. I should have gone the extra mile to avoid even the appearance of a conflict. I apologize to all of you for failing to do that.
The problem for Stephanopoulos, he is the former Clinton White House spokesman, communications director, and he aggressively challenged recent reporting that raised questions about the Clintons and their foundation. While his bosses at ABC say that they are satisfied with his response, a growing number of media critics are asking why there wasn't a bigger investigation or some sort of penalty involved here. Geraldo Rivera is a Fox News senior correspondent and host of Geraldo Rivera Reports, and Howie Kurtz is the host of Fox News' Media Buzz. Thank you both so much for being here. I want to get to Geraldo and your story in 1 second. First, let me just start with you, Howie. So last night you were on. You felt this was an egregious breach. Today he came out and gave a vocal apology. Is that the end of it? Should that be?
It's not going to be the end of it by a long shot, Megyn. It is because George Stephanopoulos underestimated both the explosive nature of giving that money to the Clinton Foundation and the negative reaction that it's created that he had to give a fuller apology, saying he shouldn't have given the money in the first place and do it on camera. But also ABC taking this way too lightly, rushing out a statement of defense. The network telling me today that it's determined that George Stephanopoulos was in violation of its policy on disclosure, but no discipline, no penalty, and he will continue to lead its 2016 presidential coverage under a cloud, in my view. That's the question is, how can he, if he's too conflicted to do the debate, how is he not too conflicted to head up their election coverage? The behind-the-scenes story on why Stephanopoulos very quickly bowed out of ABC's Republican presidential primary debate is that the network was in danger of losing that debate. Some Republicans were calling for that. But if that principle applies, as you say, then how is it all right for him to interview presidential candidates, perhaps including Hillary Clinton, the former First Lady with whom he worked? It just reinforces the doubts that some people had about George. I like him. I've been dealing with him for 20 years. He's a savvy guy. But in this case, he exercised really poor judgment, and now he's handed his critics all this ammunition about his essential fairness as a journalist.
Politico's senior media writer Jack Schaefer has a piece today that talks about how this donation corrodes much of the journalistic credibility Stephanopoulos has labored so carefully to build. Geraldo, you have a different take on this because you say you were fired by ABC for doing the same thing with much lower dollar amounts.
30 years ago, 1985, after 15 great years, I was fired by ABC, and the official reason was a $200 donation I gave to the nonpartisan mayor's race in New Bedford, Massachusetts. A family friend was running for mayor there, and we wrote a check. He was at a cocktail party that we gave. So
that was directly to a candidate, which is different.
It was directed to a candidate, but again, in a nonpartisan election. I never thought anything of it. Then the Standard Times, the local newspaper, ran an article about it. ABC News heard about it, and it came at a time where, unlike George Stephanopoulos, I was at odds with my boss, Roone Arledge, at the time, the legendary president of ABC News, the man who hired George Stephanopoulos, ironically. So Roone and I were fighting. We were at loggerheads. I had gone public about a story that he had spiked relating to the Kennedy family and their relationship with the Marilyn Monroe and the circumstances, the murky circumstances, the mob, her death.
So you thought they used it as an excuse to bounce you?
They totally used it as an excuse, and they said, this is the rule. The rule is that we have to apply it to everybody, and even you. And I was really in a terrible situation. And it was very ironic to me that was 30 years ago, and $200. This is much more money. I like Howie Kurtz, like George Stephanopoulos, a very pleasant, talented man, a wonderful family. But this is, the problem with giving this kind of money to the Clinton Foundation, them specifically, is that it has the possibility that he is paying for play, that he is giving this money to ingratiate himself with the former employer.
Well, because if he wanted to help fight AIDS, which is what he says the donation was for, or deforestation, he could have done that through any any charity.
Absolutely. There are a million ways to help the AIDS Foundation.
And he does it just in the run-up to the presidential election, 12, 13, and 14.
Well, it stinks, and I think that's why he is in trouble.
What do you make of it, Howie, though? Should he be disqualified at this point? Because it doesn't look like ABC News is going to do anything. I mean, most of the mainstream media really likes George Stephanopoulos. Three of us on this panel like George Stephanopoulos. But on the other hand, this is a breach, and it's a pretty severe one. And if I had made some donation to, the Jeb Bush Education Foundation, somehow I feel like the outcry might be a little greater.
Let me put it this way. If he is not disqualified from being, he's the face of ABC News' political coverage. If he's not disqualified from the 2016 campaign, ABC has given zero indication that will happen. These questions will dog him throughout this cycle, especially because Hillary Clinton is undoubtedly going to be the Democratic nominee. Here's a small example. On his Sunday political talk show this coming Sunday, Mitch McConnell is the scheduled guest. He hasn't canceled. So if Stephanopoulos conducts an aggressive but fair interview with the Senate Majority Leader, how many people in the audience are going to be wondering, well, would he have been as tough if he wasn't a former Democratic operative? He's trying to help the Clintons. I mean, all of this is going to continue to swirl around him.
Why do you think he did it, Geraldo? I mean, it's reckless. He says, look, it was public. It was on the foundation's website. But he knows very well that the viewers who are watching him on GMA or the weekend show aren't going onto the website and looking at proactively examining all the donors to these foundations?
The problem was the way he went after the author of Clinton Cash, Peter Schweizer. He was so aggressive that when you look back on that interview, it's not like a bulldog investigative reporter anymore. It's a partisan. It's a political partisan. He is the defender of the Clintons for whom he once worked. And I think that's unfortunate. I think he's become a terrific journalist. He's a great pundit also. He was a terrific political operator during the time he was in Bill Clinton's ear during the early 90s. So I think that for him to do this, it creates a great deal of hubris, and I think that he will be really in a tough spot trying to shake this off.
I think, he still has to explain why that charity, why during those years. There are lots of ways to give if you wanted to give. You're the most generous person I know. And it didn't have to be that charity while she was gearing up. In any event, we'll probably hear more. Great to see you.
Thank you, Meg.
You as well, Howie.
My pleasure.
After months of protests against police in big cities across the country, President Obama today went to the police memorial in Washington to share his own thoughts. Up next, a closer look at law enforcement under fire.